Hi, welcome to Kitchen Table Conversations. I'm Chessie,
And I'm Andre.
and we're here with Multicultural Family Hub. And today we are talking about money, but not
Mhm.
maybe in the way I think we're going to talk about it. So, we are in the process of moving, and this past weekend we had an estate sale, and so we got to watch kind of all the work that we've done with money in our family kind of come to fruition, and it was really cool. We want to back up and talk a little bit about our cultures and that the story we were given about money, because we all have grown up in a way and are taught to think about money in a certain way from our family culture and from the larger culture.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so why don't you share your story?
I think that my cultural story around money is kind of a unique one. One of the things I could say growing up is I never inherited or I never was passed down like a fear of money. And I'll explain what that means. I never was passed down a story where like money was something that like making money was something that was bad or losing money or not having money was something that should be feared. And so it was kind of neutral. It was like if you somehow acquired a bunch of energy and a bunch of great money, that was a blessing. And if somehow something happened and it went away or you lost it or you had to support other people that were maybe at a distance and you kind of had to let that money go, that was fine. There was always, I kind of got the story that it always would flow back to you. And, now if you think about it now in this context, there's a lot of conversations around that. That language is normal. But when I was growing up, that wasn't in like the
Yeah.
overculture. There weren't podcasts at the time, there wasn't the internet. So this wasn't really something that you would hear every day. But just, being around my mom and her friends and the people that had influenced me in my life, I never was scared of money. I was never scared of getting money. I was never scared of money going out. If you needed it, you kind of figured a way to either get a job or create a business or someone maybe in the community or your group of friends would support you. And so I think because of that, now I want to be clear, it doesn't mean I understood money on a technical level, like when you think 401ks or IRAs or high interest yield account. I didn't have an understanding of that. What I knew was that money came and it went and it wasn't something to be scared of and it didn't dictate your life. And when I think about it as a kid, the adults I were exposed to adults that had lots of economic means, lots of money, lots of resources. And they may be, but the group of friends extended from someone that was there to someone who was a small business owner, or maybe was a single mom who had a couple different jobs and who was kind of getting money or energy as needed. But there was not like a delineation between the two. It was just like, oh, this is just where we're at our journey.
Mm.
And then I also had been exposed to people that had made a lot of money and lost a lot of money, or people that when I knew them as a kid didn't have a lot of money, and then by the time I got to college, they were very successful. And so it was nothing, and money was never stagnant, but it also was nothing that ever caused me any fear or anxiety. Once I kind of got older and started to interact with other people, I realized that that cultural story I got was not the standard. It
Mm.
was a little bit unique and different. Yeah.
Yeah, so my story with money was very, very different. The cultural story that I was given is that money is bad, and that if you have less money, that you are like morally better. That like less money is better, desiring money is not good. That is the root of all evil. Um, that if you have money, there's some shame about that, and you try to give it out to your community, or you hide it
Yeah, you have
and you
to
don't
hide.
show people that you have money because you're trying to keep everybody on the same plane. Um, so a very different cultural story. I learned that being good with money is to take a small amount and stretch it to go a very long way. So there was never a feeling of abundance. There was always just a feeling of like there's a limited amount and we can make it go for a really long way. And there was like always enough, but like enough like holding on like
Mm.
this. So we grew up with very different money stories. And I think that is incredibly common in a multicultural
Yeah.
relationship and something that we have worked hard
Mhm.
to build a different culture
Mhm.
around. For me, I don't think I recognize the depth of my own personal story and how it was impacting the way that I moved through the world until I became a business owner. So I feel like for me, the rubber met the road when we started the flower farm and I was having to price bouquets and tell people what they were worth. And if you're a business owner putting out a product, really,
Mhm.
you are saying, this is what I'm worth.
Mhm.
And I'm asking you to um, exchange the energy that you have for something that I have, and that because I created it, it's worth this amount. And that was so, so hard.
Mhm. Mhm.
And recognizing that there was so much work to be done about stating value and worth and asking people to exchange for that.
Mhm.
So that for me, when we talk about money, there is like this overarching cultural story about like what money means,
Mhm.
right? In our life. Like I said, it meant it had like a moral meaning for me. And then it also becomes personal because when you are asking for someone to give you energy, to give you money for something, you are also stating your value.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, how much us having this comfortable relationship with money and our can also really impact how we think about ourselves and our own value. I want to add another piece
Mhm.
too. I just thought about when I first became a mom and stopped going outside of the house full time to bring resources in. So going outside of the home to work outside the home to earn money. I
Yeah.
struggled
Yeah.
so much because in our culture, the work of women is valued at zero.
The work of mother
The
of
works
any
of
mother.
mothers,
Yeah.
and I would say it's prime
Yeah.
correct. The work of mothers,
Mothers.
but the work that is, I should say, primarily done by females,
Yeah.
which is working in the household, caring for children, prepping meals, doing shopping, all of this
Mhm.
is not valued at all. And it was really hard to feel that sense of worth. And that was kind of when I first started grappling with this, was like,
Yeah.
wow, I feel worthless working as a mother because our culture gives no validation
Not even
at
built into the
all.
tax
Not even
code.
the tax break. I know that was something that blew my mind. If you choose to
Oh,
care for your own children instead of paying for childcare, no, there's like not even a
yeah.
tax break, which is just like more cultural value that is fascinating. But, anyways, so starting for me, becoming a mother and recognizing that, oh, wow, like the overculture does not value this work, this energy exchange.
Yeah.
And I am not finding it within myself, and then running up into it again, becoming a business owner.
Mhm.
So um, that money tied to your sense of self-worth or your thoughts about money and your story about money.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anything else there?
Yeah, I would just kind of also go into, I think, geo culture and geography played definitely a role in chessing the different stories about money that we both
Yeah.
inherited. Being raised outside of the greater Atlanta area, there's a lot of people, there's someone doing there's probably someone doing a little bit of everything. And I think about just my daily interactions, or I think about going to certain places, like, and I'll even use like a barbershop, for example. You know, it's like within a barbershop culture, you have the owner of the barbershop who's an entrepreneur, then you have the barbers who sometimes are renting chairs and they're running. So there's like a business within a business, and there's a lot of money or cash or energy exchange daily, daily, daily. And then I think about maybe like the farmers markets or the flea markets or different places where I go to where everyone has a stall. So you have this overarching business, and within that are in one place maybe 100 business owners, and they're each selling or creating or doing something very different. And so, it was kind of conscious, but I didn't realize how I was just in because of the geography I grew up in, I was constantly watching modeled
Hmm.
people having to be very fearless around I'm going to try. I don't know if it's going to work. Oh, it worked. Oh, that thing ended. Now I'm going to go take my tax exam and do, and do work in the tax season for a period of time. And then, okay, that's ending. And so because of that, it wasn't necessarily just our households or it wasn't our communities. I think it was
Hmm.
regional. Then you
Yeah.
growing up, within the context of rural
Yeah.
Northern California in a kind of an ag-based
There's a lot of
context.
identity
Yeah.
tied up in how you make your living. So
Mm,
it's like people didn't switch jobs,
mhm,
right? You were this thing. You are a rancher, and so your family does that, and you have done that
mhm,
forever. Or you are a teacher and you
mhm,
do that your entire career. And there was not a lot of switching to say like, oh, I tried this thing and it didn't work. That doesn't mean anything about me.
mhm.
I'm just going to move on and do something different. There wasn't, I mean, there's just a smaller population in general too.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's people within that,
Mm,
but the model that I saw within rural America is very much that like
mm.
what you do to make a living is part of your identity as
Yeah.
well.
And so then because of that, it is harder to separate your worth, your
Yeah.
value, your identity from this thing that we call money. So
Oh, I
with
wanted to pause too.
yeah,
Sorry. Just thinking about money. The one of the reasons we use the phrase energy, and I know people might say that's
oh,
like
you're
woo
switching. Yeah.
woo, right? We kind of interchange money with energy. I think recently one of our kids was like, "What is money?"
Yeah.
And like, why do we have it? And talking about going from a moment when we used to barter, people used to use shells as a
Mm.
placeholder, or if
For
like
rock.
we're playing Settlers of Catan, right? If I want your sheep, I have to give
Yeah.
you logs for it, and but I want this thing over here and I don't have it, so I need like an energetic placeholder.
Hmm.
And so we kind of use Settlers of Catan as a framework talking about like this is what it means to like trade one to
Hmm.
one. But when you have more people and more things that you want to trade, you need to have some kind of a placeholder.
Yeah.
And even
Standard.
now, like, yes, we have paper money, but most of the time it's just a
Sure.
number in a bank account, right? It's just this like amount of like esoteric stored energy, which is kind of wild. And our
Yeah.
faith in each other
Yeah.
that we believe in this exchange of energy.
Yeah, I mean, I think at one point, maybe not too long ago, someone said, "Oh, well, money is kind of like energy." People would be like, "Oh, that's a little bit woo in it." But now, okay, go into a coffee shop or anywhere, most places, and it's time to pay. Well, you can potentially just pull out your phone, scan it across, right? So it's not even a debit card. So there's a scan. So what happens with that is the information that is stored in your phone or in the cloud is exchanged from your device energetically through a signal to that device, and that exchanges a number. So it doesn't, we're at a point now in our culture where like we are literally exchanging signals. So if
Yeah.
energy is too woo, you can look at it as it's an exchange of signals or it's an exchange of information, and yeah, we sometimes are still exchanging hard currency as in cash, but more and more we're exchanging information, a signal or an energetic exchange.
Or even
And so,
we're exchanging a belief.
yeah,
We're exchanging a belief like, yeah, I believe that this is worth this amount.
yeah,
So just like thinking about because we're gonna kind of use the term energy and money
yeah,
interchangeably, and that is the way I feel like for our family has become the most healthy
yeah.
because like we said, we have these like stories about money that we grow up
Mhm,
with. And so for us, even to change some language around
mhm,
it and use like, oh, um, for example, with our kids, if they ask for something and I either don't want to buy it or I feel like it's too expensive from an old mindset, I'll say, oh, we don't want to spend our energy on that. Like, we're going to choose to spend our
mhm,
energy over here. That's not something that our family necessarily values. Whereas the language of like, we don't have enough money for that, we don't have enough for that, that creates a very different frame
mhm,
about
mhm.
like how energy moves
Yeah,
and that there's not enough.
yeah.
And that like our family doesn't have enough. And it creates, you can see where that plays into like the worth structure too.
Yeah, and kind of going back to beliefs, I think you and I, when we were, well, in Lesotho, inside of a country located inside South Africa. I think that's the
Yeah.
first time you and I really got to see, oh, the way that a belief about money can be different, but also a belief about what's more valuable, cash or a certain resource. And in this context, it was cattle,
Cows. So
cattle, cows.
yeah, Lesotho is so fascinating. I recognized just how like deeply American I was and where for us like how we understand money in a very different way. And so and value. So in Lesotho, while we were there, um, cows held the largest place value. So 10 cows was worth more than 9 cows. And it could be 10 like emaciated cows is worth like more than 9 super healthy cows. So for us, we're thinking like, well, 9 healthy cows, you could sell them and you could get more money. But there in that frame, it was even hard to wrap my brain around. Like it wasn't about like you would sell the cows, like the cows were inherently valuable, and 10 is worth more than 9. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was just interesting. Like we're talking about, like I said, talking about energy and beliefs, and so beliefs about money, and again, how your culture can influence you, because as an American and as a Western person, I have a very specific thoughts and beliefs about like how money works and how you get money and how it moves. And we have lemonade stands from the time we're small kids, and so this like exchange to understand like selling lemonade and you get this exchange of
No.
dollars.
And I think for us, it was great because once again, it's not saying one is good or one is bad. It's just saying it allows you to step back and go, oh, my relationship with this thing is not, it is not necessarily tied to who I am as a human being, as a person. It's tied to my culture and it's
Yeah,
tied to the place I grew up and it's tied to the
absolutely.
geography. And so it allows you to kind of put a little distance between you and the story about it. And then that way, when the story shifts, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, or something happens at a larger level, that kind of makes you kind of have to go, okay, I need to move through this differently. You have a little space from it and a little more freedom to move because you're like, oh, me shifting my relationship with this doesn't change anything or say anything about who I am as a human being. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of want to go back to when we talked about, in our family culture, with our kids, we refer to money, but we also refer to energy and resources. And what's really interesting about this, Cody, the rich flower farmer,
Oh,
is,
yes.
as Chessie was, engaged in the experience of, being a woman and being an entrepreneur and being a flower farmer and really kind of figuring all those things out simultaneously as this was going on, our kids are watching this whole process. And then I just remember distinctively, maybe it was year two, we were somewhere and our son, one of our sons, Leo, was talking to someone.
Yeah.
And you were there for this. And go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I think it was in Miami.
Okay, yeah, we're in
Yeah,
Miami,
he was
Florida.
like talking to another child
Yeah.
and was like telling them that our family grows flowers. She's a flower farmer. My mom is a super rich flower farmer. She
Yeah.
grows all these flowers and gets all this
Yeah.
money.
Yeah. And it was, we were like, and you're kind of hearing this, and it was really eye-opening, but it was also simultaneously beautiful because it's not, he didn't say, my mom has this many dollars in this account, or my mom has made this much money based on her, tax return. He said, my mom is rich and she is a rich flower farm. And so when you think about from the context of your children and you think about rich or poor, you can look at that economically, but you can look at it more from a philosophical or even like a spiritual standpoint of what do those things mean. And so what he was saying in my mind, what I heard is a child saying, based on my experience with this adult, they are fulfilled. They are
Yeah.
well, they are healthy, they believe in themselves. I think when a child, I look at this like a 6-year-old, 5-year-old's brain, they might not have the language that we have to articulate
Mm.
all the things they see about you, but rich or we are poor or my dad is poor, that language tells you a lot about how the context of the culture framework they have. once again, I don't think our son was referencing the amount, the debt to income ratio. I think he was referencing a lifestyle, or he was
Yeah.
referencing an experience. And so, what I think the reason why he was able to come to that conclusion is because we don't just frame things as dollars and cents in our family culture. We talk about energy and the exchange of it. And that is a much gives you a much larger perspective than a binary of you have this much and or you have this much money or you don't have this much money versus, well, when you talk about energy, well, how much do you have?
And
Is it endless?
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to butcher this study, but I'm going to give you this like overarching frame of it because I think it's super
Okay.
important. So, and it's about belief and exactly what we're talking about with our son and saying like our family is super rich, right? So, in a region of India that had been kind of like cordoned off from the West,
Mm,
right? Not a lot of interactions. And this study is probably 50 plus years old. So they went in and interviewed the people and just attitudes,
mm,
right? And it was like a sociology study. And people were there was clean water. It was a primarily like subsistence agriculture lifestyle. So they weren't doing a lot of trading, just growing, eating food, and there was high satisfaction, clean water, there was enough to eat, and just like kind of a beautiful existence from the attitude of the people
mm,
on like a sociological standpoint. And then they monitored it like over the course of like 15 years with Western influence and people coming in, aid organizations, and saying, you're poor. Like you are poor. You don't have all this other stuff,
mm,
right? You don't have running water in your home. Like you don't have electricity. So this means you are poor. And so over the course of
mm,
15 years, nothing changed
mm,
in this village
mm,
setting. Like people are still have enough to eat, there is still clean water. But after that course of time,
mm,
interviewing interviewing people that lived there, the attitude was that, oh, we are poor.
mm,
So that just the belief that and someone telling you that you are poor
mm,
can have an effect on how you see
mm,
yourself
mm,
and seeing yourself as poor and seeing yourself as disenfranchised.
mm,
Well, we can't do these things because we're poor. And that study, I heard it probably 10 years ago. I believe I actually read it in a book when we were in Lesotho.
mm,
And it just like stuck in me so deeply about the stories that we tell ourselves and the
mm.
stories
Well,
that we are told and that our culture
yeah.
tells us that you are this thing. And um, for me, sharing a win that when our kids say like we are super rich, even if our bank account compared to other people's, like someone might laugh and be like, that is 100% not
But
true.
you guys are poor.
You don't.
No.
But um that belief and hearing our
Mm.
kids believe it too, that like we are rich, and how much to me that changes our whole life.
Yeah, it changes our life, but I also think then it has generational impacts.
Yes.
And I think, when you talk about that study, I think we can all listen to that and we can kind of go, oh yeah, we could see where the missteps happen when we think about that on an organizational level. But I think what we often don't do is say, okay, am I doing that exact same thing within my own framework of my own home?
Oh,
You know, Now I want to be very clear here, um, that this takes a lot of intention and it takes a lot of practice because the way we communicate with each other often is verbally. And so it takes a lot of intention, a lot of practice to be conscious of what are the words you're using to with each other as adults, but also what are you using around your kids, or then what are you using with your kids. And a great example of this is going to be, especially, I mean, we've all been there. You're out, somebody wants something, or somebody's asking for something, and the automatic response that we maybe all inherited with might be something like, oh, we can't afford that, or we're not going to do that, or all these automatic things, versus really being intentional, like, I want to respond to this in a way that lets my child or my teenager understand that we have options and that we might, and that we're going to look and see, like, is this something we are willing to exchange our energy for?
Mm.
Because a lot of times we might say, like, oh, we don't have enough for that thing. But the reality is, and we'll kind of tie this back to our state sale, the reality is if we truly valued and wanted that, we could make the decision to release energy that is stored up in other things that we have that we may aren't even using or we actually don't really care about, and acquire that and put it to that thing. And so when we talk about using language that convinces someone that's poor, sometimes it's intentional, but I think oftentimes as parents, it's unintentional.
Yeah.
And it's not that we are trying to cause harm, it's just that we are not being conscious and aware of the story that we either inherited, we've adopted, we've told ourselves, and then we're
Yeah.
repeating it down the line. And so a lot of times, especially nowadays, you'll hear terms like generational poverty, and people kind of look at the metrics of, income earners throughout generations. And that's one framework. I'm not, that's not my framework.
Mm.
I think you can also look at this as like generational wealth or generational poverty regarding the stories one is told and passed down through the generations.
Yeah.
And I think that generational wealth or generational, in quote unquote, my 5-year-old being a rich family, that can happen through the stories and the cultural narratives that are expressed and passed down from parent to kid and on. Now, my hypothesis is that once one has that cultural story, it probably changes your behavior. It probably influences your actions.
Mm.
It probably allows you to say yes to certain things that puts you in a space that more resources or more energy or more opportunities become available. That's just a hypothesis. I don't have any science or data behind it, but I feel like it's been very true within my life and continues to be true. So going back to the estate sale, which is kind of why we end up here. And
So
not a yard sale, by the way, it was an estate
it's
sale.
very fancy.
I have something about the word yard. Side note, I can't use the word yard when I'm marketing anything. For some reason, the word yard, I I think of like there's chickens and there's like 5 cars on blocks. So I try to avoid the word yard
I
sale
think you said
or
it also had prison connotation.
prison yard,
Yes.
or I have a friend that calls chickens like yard meat. And so I don't know. And so it's a me thing. So it was an estate sale. It was
Estate
not a
sale.
yard sale. Sorry if you've had a yard sale, but it's just, one of those things.
Fine. Um, so over the past few years, as we've had our business, the kids have been able to participate in different ways. So we'll have pop-up flower stands.
Mhm.
And so in these flower stands, over time, they have sold lemonade, they have baked
Uh,
scones. Those are the two main ways that they have been able to like sell their wares. And so they have a little bit of practice at like selling things, learning about
mm,
value, customer
yeah,
service.
yeah,
So for this estate sale, they were allowed to go through their toys and they each had like their own booth
yeah.
at the estate
Uh,
sale with their own products.
And in the past, we've done this, they were a little bit younger, so we would kind of support in terms of, okay, how much do you want to sell that or acquire the material? But this was a little bit different. This was like,
Right. You're
okay,
on your own.
you're
And
on your
we
own here because we were doing other things.
we also chose not to price
Yeah.
anything because
As an exercise
as
in,
an exercise and also just like where we're at in this journey where it's like we want our things that we are letting go to go to people that want them. And so we didn't price anything and just said like, okay, well, what do you want to pay for this?
no.
And would kind of throw out a number and people would say, okay, great.
Yes.
Um,
And for our kids, it was important. Like I intentionally didn't price anything because I wanted them to get the opportunity. Once again, it's an opportunity. It's very uncomfortable, and we'll talk about that a little more. An uncomfortable opportunity to state what you value something as. Like you state the value first, and then someone could say no or yes. But like to be able to put, I believe the value of this is this. I thought it was a great opportunity for them to get used to that uncomfortable chest tightening kind of abdominal feeling. Because
yeah.
I don't care if you're 4 or 45 or 65, it's a practice.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
And I think our kids also could only do this because they had previously done
Yeah.
it. So they would take whatever they'd earned in these situations and then we'd go to the local toy store and they would pick out what they want. So they had an idea about how much what they valued costs.
Yes. Yeah.
And so they had like all of most of these toys were things that they had bought
Yes.
like at full price at a toy store. And so they were having to make all these calculations, right?
Hmm.
And so one of our children, always the same,
No, it's not always the same. It's just he's a frequent guest on the show. Let's say that way.
is quite the entrepreneur and he has like loved money from day one.
And he has said that. I think he was
No, he was
4 and
so
he
little.
looked me in the eye and he
Maybe
just said,
three. He was
yeah, he looked
little.
me right and he said, I love money. And I was like, okay,
All right,
well, keep
cool.
going. Let's see where that
And
goes.
like he just has like loved selling things. Like that kid will door to door you. One time he made bracelets and was just like going door to door in his pajamas selling bracelets. I mean, this kid is a champ.
Yeah, moving product. Um,
So he for a long time wanted to be a chef. We've like moved on to other endeavors, but he had this play kitchen and over time he had like stocked it with stuff. He had a play kitchen, he had a play barbecue that he and his sister had put a fresh coat of paint on.
yeah, and the kitchen, when we got it, it was for a small child. So it had, it came with a couple little things, but when just over time, I mean, over time, he has used money to go to like the local thrift store, secondhand store, and has bought like graters, pots, pans, plates, a juicer, a waffle maker. So
He
he's
kept the
like
juicer.
acquired actual cooking. And it's funny, the juicer he got, I had a friend who was visiting that worked in, food service, and she was like, "Oh, that juicer that he had bought for whatever, $10, that's a something, something, something model juicer, and it's one that bartenders use to juice oranges." And so these are all the things that he has that are now stocked in this play kitchen. So
Yes.
there's a little bit of context for you guys.
So the play kitchen caught the eye of a local restaurant owner
Another
who, like a
entrepreneur.
entrepreneur, who was like, "Oh, how much is that?" This was before the sale even.
Yes.
So she's like, "Oh, how much is that?" And I'm like, "Well, that's Leo's, and you're gonna have to negotiate with
Talk.
him." And he wasn't there at the moment. So when they got back, this restaurant's like maybe 2 blocks away. So when they got home, I was like, okay, Leo, like you need to go negotiate your price for your play kitchen. I was like, this owner wants it. She wants to put it outdoors so that when families come, that kids have a spot where they can be occupied and playing. And like, you got to go do this. And he was so nervous. And I was like, Ruby can come with you if you want, like
But
as
we can't,
support, but
we can't,
we're not gonna do it. We got other stuff we need to do. And so he was just like you could see he was just racked with nervousness. He
and
was so
yeah, yeah.
nervous and
And
he
the
was scared.
nervousness, but and it's current. It wasn't about talking to an adult. It wasn't about going to the place. Once again, it's the same anxiety any entrepreneur or business owner or adult feels when someone says, "How much?"
And you
You're
have
gonna
to
have to
state it out loud
state it out loud and
and do it on your own.
do your own. And this is something that he's had experience, like meaning this kitchen. He's got an emotional attachment to it. He's got history. It's something that's been a part of his life. Just like any artist that creates anything, like before you ever put it out to the public, you have a whole back history with this thing, or any business owner. You have all the back stuff that no one ever sees that that you know about, they don't know about, and you can't expect them to know about. And so, do you add that onto the value of that thing? And that's what he was having to.
Yeah, what's the
Yeah,
right price?
yeah,
And yeah, how do I grapple with this? And
yeah,
so he went on his own and negotiated a price
yeah.
that honestly was
Good
pretty
price.
impressive.
Yeah, good price. Yeah, $50.
$50 for
Yeah,
this, like, I mean, it's well loved.
yeah.
So, and then he gets home and he tells me, I'm like, wow, nice work.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know what? I'm gonna throw in the barbecue too. She doesn't even know it, but she's gonna love it.
I'm gonna throw in the barbecue. there's a marketing term. I can't remember it, but I'm gonna give you something for free. I'm gonna give you something free, but it's really included in that $50 price.
So it
Yeah,
was so
but then they
cute.
did. Then they went and they dolled it up though.
Oh wait, yeah, he
Yeah,
got it all.
painted it
Well,
or
they had pre-painted it.
yeah.
It was already, it was fixed.
Hmm.
So we did our estate sale and then later that afternoon delivered the play kitchen to the restaurant. And
And
then
we're like,
we're exhausted.
okay. Yeah.
And so we went there for dinner and we sat outside and the owner was like cleaning up the play kitchen, getting it ready for people. And we had dinner. And while we were there, a family came and there was a little boy that came over and started playing at the kitchen. And
Yeah.
like the look in Leo's eyes was just the
Yeah.
most
Well,
precious.
and there was this moment where, you know how if you ever seen a kid come up to any kind of object they never experienced before, where the young boy he comes up to it and he opens the cabinets and he opens one and they do that thing where they first have to open every and see okay this and so he's doing that and there's no one there's no, it's just him and as he's doing that I'm watching and then he opens it and he kind of looks and he sees Leo and they make this eye contact, these two boys. And I know that eye contact, and the eye contact was like the boy was looking at him going, "Do you know how this is awesome?"
Yeah.
And then Leo's like, kind of, and there's no words, but his eyes are like, "Yeah, I know.
I did
I
that.
did that. It's yours now. Play." And I think that's the magic.
Oh, and then he said, he goes, I'm so glad that we donated that play kitchen.
We donated.
I was like, well, there's a different word, but I see your
Yeah, yeah,
sentiment.
yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. He's like, but the point of like he was like, I'm so glad that I let that go. That it was time to release that energy, or we can call it it's time to sell that, which is just the form of like this energy needs to go out so I can make room for something else. It was time to let go of that. Versus hold on to it. Versus try to keep it as mine. Versus hoard it and not use it and not touch it, and it's just taking up space. It was like this needs to be out there so somebody else, another human being can enjoy it and can use it. And we're talking about a play kitchen, but we all know that that doesn't matter. You could be talking about a car, you could be talking about a business, a product. All of this functions the same way.
And
And
I
so
think also being able to see that um you you are he was getting value,
the
right?
value,
Because
yeah.
he's saving up for something.
Yes.
And that it was really valuable to the owner as well, because you could see how that was playing out. And so when we are determining our worth
Yes.
and asking for and stating a price, for us, something that seems scary or might seem high
Mhm.
is such a good, like us being able to state that thing is so good for us and so good for the other person.
Yeah.
And that our stories about money sometimes can inhibit us from asking for what we need, which actually is good for the other person too.
Yeah.
Because that was part of my like cultural story is that you always do things less and that's better for everyone because there's not enough money and no one has enough money. So you need to make sure everything is like cheap.
Yeah.
Versus saying like, oh wow, this is how much it's worth and it's gonna help me and it's gonna help you.
Yeah, because when you state the actual value of yourself or that thing, you're able to, once again, that energy comes in, and then you're able to say, okay, how can I use this to support others or to spread it out there? Versus if you make yourself smaller or if you devalue yourself or you devalue that thing, well, then you're limiting the amount of energy that you can then take and impact to another human being.
Mm.
So going back to that story, that exchange of that kitchen allowed, Leo got an exchange of energy of money that he wants to use. The owner got a place that she could set up for kids, which has a massive impact on kids or family, especially if you've ever sat and trying to wait for food. It creates an enjoyable experience versus what do you do? And then there's the kids that are going to be there that are the ones interacting and creating these memories of these places. And all of that happened. The foundation of all of that comes from the ability one has to have to say, this is what this is valued and I'm going to put it out there. And another human being, there's how many millions of people out there, there's someone else that's going to see the same value in this, and we are going to connect. Versus no one's going to pay for that, or I'm not worth that, or this thing isn't worth that, and believing that story.
Mhm.
And so for us, it was just it reinforced that you can have these complex conversations with your kids. And one of the things that we've talked about is starting these conversations early. And it
Yeah.
doesn't, like I said, you don't have to go into, you know, financial investment strategies and da da da. You can start with that simple baseline of what is an energy exchange? What is money? Why do we have this? What do we use it for? Because I think once again, we talk about generational wealth. What we're really talking about is the concepts and passing down the ideas of value. You are valuable. You are rich. You are because you are. And
Yeah.
because you are, you have something to offer, right? And you also can receive, and then you can continue to spread it out.
And I think the conversations are important, but
Mhm.
the action is just
The
as
modeling
important.
it.
Because I think the for our kids to be able to have sold things, to have like done pop-up scone stands, to have done pop-up lemonade stands, to have sold stuff door to door, and have that understanding of like energy exchange and value exchange. And there's so many skills that happen with that
Mhm.
too. And I think the conversations are this like backbone, and then letting them experience
Mhm.
that on their own, and being able to handle their own money and buy their own things.
Mhm.
Which I just was forgetting about when we went to Atlanta, and
Oh,
we went into
hot Atlanta.
Leo was looking for a man bag, and we went to
Which
this,
is a satchel, in case
which
you
is
don't
a
know what that
satchel,
means.
right? He was looking
Think
for
Indiana
something to
Jones.
hold his money, and
Yeah.
he walked into like this artisan,
Oh man.
this like artisan shop where they handmade leather bags.
Mhm.
And he asked how much one was, and the guy said $200. And Leo looked at him and said, "What did he say?" He said, "I said the bag, not the whole shop." And then
This guy was like, and the guy's looking at me. I'm like, dude, this is
no,
not my
and
problem.
then
Okay, I have you. This is your customer. I'm gonna go over here.
And then Leo like negotiated his value. So he was like, I want one of these. These are
These are
awesome.
awesome bags.
And
Yeah.
then he was able to find like the guy found what is it, like
Walk up.
like the model
Yeah,
ones, the
model one.
sample. He found like
Yeah.
a sample bag, and they ended up negotiating a price on the sample bag. But then that entrepreneur like looked at us and was just, you
There,
got one on
you
your
got
hands,
one on
man.
your hands. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I think,
yeah,
and my personal opinion is that they all are that in different ways. It might show up in
yeah,
different ways,
yeah,
and I think one of the things that we have to remember as parents and as families is is to catch the stories that would limit their spirit, their value from coming to the surface in its own unique way.
yeah.
And that's kind of the work and that's the practice. You know, and there's been times where Chelsea and I have responded in ways that do have a limited thought or limited belief.
A lot
And
of times.
yeah, a lot of times. And then we have to go back and, we make that correction. But the more that we have been on the receiving end of watching them live those principles or watching them physically engage in it, the more we realize just how much of an impact it has on our family culture.
Yeah.
And kind of the last thing I would say is like I think it's a really important exercise, like just said, allowing them to actually then step in the world and do it in ways that have support and maybe
And
and
age
boundaries and are
appropriate,
age
because it's
appropriate.
changed over time.
Yeah, age appropriate. But like I said, I don't care if you're selling a lemonade, or I don't care if you're trying to negotiate a price on a kitchen stand, or I don't care if you're trying to figure out, negotiate a price for a book deal. There's a physiological response that happens in the body when you have to verbally state your worth because the body knows there's always the possibility of rejection, right? Anytime you go and you verbally state, this is this, or I am worth this, you don't control the outcome. It's not always an automatic yes. And so the body's kind of like trying to convince you not to do that because in some ways it is unsafe. It's like, well, what happens if they say no? What happens if they reject you? What if that person says, I think that's a terrible book idea? Can we handle that? And the reality is the more that we as adults, but also our kids, hit that discomfort, go through the process, and realize you're okay. They said yes or they said no, and even if they said no, you're live. It's fine. That is the thing that eventually we talk a lot about, like people just knowing their value. Well, I think that's great philosophically, but I think there is part is an embodied part of that where you have to kind of learn to live that value so that the discomfort it comes, but then it goes down. It doesn't prevent you from moving
Mm.
forward. And in the yin yoga tradition, we have a thing where, we call it you hit the discomfort, you pause, and you be still. And so, the discomfort here is I'm going to state my value, then I'm going to pause, and I don't control your response, and I'm going to be still. And then I'm going to receive it and then go from there.
Mm.
And so there's that. So that's our little topic for this week.
Yeah, I'd encourage you guys just to, as parents, if you're thinking about being from different cultures, and most of the time we do come from
Yes.
different money cultures, is just think about your own.
Hmm.
What were the stories you were given and just chat about that with your partner and then like what do you want to give your kids?
Yeah.
What do you want to pass down that was good from that?
Hmm.
One of the things I love from how I grew up was valuing the things that we did have
Hmm.
and being thoughtful about purchases and considering options and I am always looking at all the things, and that might be personality, but
Hmm.
there are things that I am happy that I came from to bring and things that we're letting go.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, and if this kind of topic interests you or sparks you, this will be we'll talk about money in one of our workshops
Hmm.
for our multicultural family hub community.
Yeah.
And it's something I feel like we're both pretty passionate about because it is a huge part of our culture. And I think that there's so many ways to leverage it to do beautiful
Yeah.
things.
It's not something you're going to get away from. And, there's people that say, well, wouldn't it be different if you had different? It's like, this is a part of a beautiful part of being in the culture that we're in. And you can develop a beautiful relationship with it.
Yeah.
However, it takes tools, it takes practice, it
Intentionality.
takes intentional, and it does within a family, it takes conversation and it
Yeah.
takes communication because it can get stale, it can get stagnant. And when that happens, then it can become something that is not healthy and can be harmful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're
So,
excited to share that within our community, that workshop. It's going to be a
yeah.
deep dive into a lot of different topics around family, money,
And your
and
story with
the
that.
story with it. Yeah.
So, just keeping you in the loop, our community is still on track to open in June.
Yep.
Keep listening to our podcast. So I would love it if this resonated with you to share it with someone that you think also it might
Yeah.
resonate with. Someone that has kids, someone that's thinking about having kids, or just has a family.
Yeah.
That helps us so much if you share this content. What also helps is if you leave a review and more people can find it, whether it's podcast version or YouTube version. We love it. We really want to engage with you too and hear what's coming up for you and what you want to hear more about.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for giving us your precious gift of time. We do not take it lightly and are so happy to be here with you. And we'll chat next week.
All right. See you guys next time.
Thanks.